Here is a league-winning running back who has a great fantasy football playoff schedule. And that man is Philadelphia Eagles running back DeAndre Swift. Swift has one of the best, if not the best, fantasy football playoff schedule for the position. Week 15, Swift faces the Seahawks, who allow the 5th most fantasy points per game to running backs and the 10th most rushing yards per game this season. Then in Week 16, the semifinals, Swift faces the Giants, who allow the 8th most fantasy points per game to running backs and the 4th most rushing yards per game this season. And then finally, if you have them and you're in the championship, Week 17, he faces the Cardinals, who allow the 2nd most fantasy points per game to running backs and the 3rd most rushing yards per game this season. That's 3 smash matchups for fantasy football. And the concern is that he's been pretty bad for fantasy football the last 3 weeks in a row. He scored under 10 fantasy points in all 3 of those games and under 5 fantasy points the last 2 weeks. But there's always more context to everything. Those performances were highly tied to game scripts that impacted his volume. 37-34 win in Week 12 over the Bills. Blown out by the 49ers 19-42 in Week 13. And then pretty much blown out again last week against the Cowboys, 13-33. 3 big games against big opponents just simply did not mean featuring DeAndre Swift in the game plan. Swift has played above 50% of the snaps for the Eagles in all but 2 games this season. 8 games of 17-plus touches and 3 games of 20-plus touches. Kenneth Gainwell, the next running back in line, does see some work and his snaps increase the last 2 weeks. But again, very game script tied. He's played under 40% of the snaps in 7 games this year. 5 top 12 fantasy weeks for Swift this season. 7 games of 14-plus fantasy points. 4 games of 16-plus fantasy points. And 2 games of 19-plus fantasy points. This is a true dual-threat running back with upsides both on the ground and through the air. Swift has had games of 175 and 130 rushing yards. 6 weeks above 4 yards per carry. He's currently 4th in total rushing yards on the year for the position. And via Player Profiler, he's number 11 in evaded tackles and number 9 in breakaway runs. On the receiving end, 4 games over 30 receiving yards. Games of 6 and 8 receptions. And on the resume, 3 seasons prior to 2023, ranging from 46 to 62 receptions. So we have the feature back on one of the best offenses in the NFL, who has shown us both upside on the ground and through the air, has had plenty of very, very valuable fantasy weeks this year, and has a smash matchup in each week of the fantasy playoffs. DeAndre Swift is going to be a league winner this year.